Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be reviewing another dash cam. I know I've done several of these recently, but I have at least one more I want to get reviewed here on the channel. A little different than what I typically do. Most of my stuff is RC related, but a little stuff like this from time to time can be sort of fun and a little change of pace for the channel. Now, this is another Surfola dash cam. This is the SD810. This is like their premium dash cam. This one is capable of 4K video, and I'll say 4K with air quotes. We'll get back to it in a moment. Has a touch screen, which is really nice. Navigating the menus is so much easier with the touch screen compared to having to, fumble around with buttons on the side and stuff. And it has GPS. The GPS is really nice because that allows you to play back your video on your computer in special software such as a GPS player. I'll include a link to that software down in the video description that lets you, it shows the video, it also maps on your computer where you're driving, the gyro, the G-shock sensor in the car. It gives this information and it shows like your average speed and all that stuff. So I'll try to include a screenshot of that software, what it looks like here, just so you have an idea like from their website and a link to that, but I'm not going to actually demonstrate the software in this video. So that's enough of that. Let's go ahead and get inside here and take a look at the dash cam itself. Now this dash cam, like the others, does have a built-in rechargeable battery, but the rechargeable battery is not going to last very long. You need to make sure you're using an external power source with this camera. It's just basically for powering on the camera whenever it's going to record while you're in that parking mode, which actually is monitoring your car for any vibrations, and then it starts recording if it sends someone like breaking into the window of your car. It's a security thing. That's really what the internal battery is for. So here's the instruction manual here and this quick startup guide. So take a quick look at that. It's not too bad. It's just, it's in English and Chinese, but there's not like it's not super in-depth. Some of their other manuals actually have a little more information about this, but it gives you some of the basics here. So yeah, it's just information about the TF card. The TF card, it can go up to 128 gigs in this. They recommend 32 or 128. They don't recommend using a 64 for some reason. There must be some sort of issues with that. And then here's like a quick start, how to power it up, how to run the wire. They recommend how to run the wire in your car, if I could spit it out. And here is the camera, and here is the front and the rear camera. So I hadn't mentioned it yet, but this is a front and a rear system. So you have a 4K capable front camera and a 1080p rear camera. So a lot of them have 720p rear. This actually can do 1080p. And again, these being so important for covering yourself for insurance reasons, it is nice to have a rear-facing camera in case someone would rear-end you and you could prove that it was not your fault. So here is the camera, and I've had this out a few times and charged it, so there was some protective film on the front and the back, which I've already removed. Here's some USB-C connectors. This is for charging and hooking up a rear camera. Now you got your power button on the side. This is a reset hole. You put the little pin in there, you can reset it. This is where your micro SD card goes. And it doesn't have any other external buttons because everything else is touchscreen. So let's take a look real quick at the other camera, the rear 1080p. And then we'll take a look at the cables and stuff that comes with it for powering and running it to the back. So here is that 1080p rear camera. It looks pretty nice. It's one thing I like about this one is it's got this adhesive here. So you actually mount it to the window. So you can mount this by the way you see it here on your rear window. I'm pretty sure with the slope of this here, you can mount this on the inside of your window, and you don't have to have it outside like some of the other ones. Some of the other ones that from these Surfola and other ones, they want you on those really cheap cube 720p cube cameras in the rear. They want you to mount those on the outside of the car due to the way it's designed, and of course it's exposed to elements. Someone could pull it off, rip it off, steal it. This ought to be fine going on the inside of your car. So I'm going to permanently put this in my car. So I plan to, in the sample footage coming up, have this mounted the same way as if it's going to be in my car all the time. So that is your rear camera, and there is a USB-C connection that goes up to the front again to either one of those USB-C connectors. So let's go ahead and power up the camera, go through some of the menus and such, and then we'll look at those cables, and then we'll go outside for some sample footage. So I have charged this, so hopefully that it stays on through the video here, because again, the internal battery is not going to be the greatest. Since I powered it on, oops, I tapped the button, it is going to start recording automatically. So you press this little stop button, and there you go. And you got a microphone, your record button, and this one here I think was at the emergency recording. It says on there. That could be if it's recording because of shock or something, like if you're using the parking sensor. And across the top you got your 3-minute loop recording, wide dynamic range. It's looking for GPS signal here. Now again, this is probably not going to show up particularly well in the video because it's so small, but I'm down in my basement, so it doesn't have any GPS satellites right now. Your micro SD card and your battery meter, which it already shows it at half. So down here it's going to show your GPS coordinates, and it's going to have your miles per hour. Since I've switched it to Imperial, GPS is going to allow it to show on the screen the speed you're traveling. And of course, like I said, the GPS player software will show all that as well from the recorded video off the SD card. Here's the date and time, and up here you can put your license plate. I've not put that in yet. I'm not going to include that in my video for safety reasons, but and it's going to want to auto shut down here, so let's tap it to keep it awake. But yeah, you can put your license plate in. That is nice because if you're in an accident, you submit the video to insurance, they can immediately identify the video with yours because of your license plate. So let's go into the menu here and let's take a look around and see what options it has. These 3 little bars here is what you want to tap. Photo, video, photo, playback, etc. Video, just put it in video mode. Photo would put it into if you want to take photos. You can see that's photo mode. Playback lets you play back any files like emergency recordings or normal recording and your photos on the card. And then setup. Get your camera and your system. So the menu is almost identical to the other Surfola cameras I reviewed. They just were not touchscreen. In your camera settings, you get your resolution. Now right now I've got it set to 1080p at 60. You can go 4K, 2K, 1080p at 60, 1080p at 30, and 720p. Now, earlier I mentioned 4K and I did little air quotes. The caveat with this is this camera can't really record true 4K footage. The IMX335 sensor from Sony that's in this is a very good sensor. I have no doubt it can support that, but you have to have an image processor that can. And this is a Novatech image processor. I don't remember the model name because they don't actually state it on this one. Some of the other ones they do, and I assume they may be the same as their other ones, but it has to upscale that or interpolate. So it's actually scaling it up to look like 4K. That takes some processing power as well, but it's easier to do than recording the high bit rate 4K video right off the sensor. And to do that is very difficult. So it can upscale it, but the problem with that is it just is sluggish. So it does 4K at 30. Let's tap this again. But 4K at 30, it doesn't really seem like it's doing 4K at 30. It's very slow. So as we see when we get to the sample footage, my little footage I took with it, it's very, it seems like it's just not recording it. It seems like it's recording at 15 frames per second. It may say it's 30, but it's just that upscaling process. It isn't smooth. I would not recommend using 4K on this one. But you know what? That doesn't matter to most people. I'm not defending them. But you can do 1080p, even 720p for most reasons is good, but good enough. But you want to be able to see the license plate mostly on a car. 1080p is going to be great. So you can do 2K, and I believe that is going to be real 2K. When I did the sample at 2K, the playback was much smoother. So if you're going to want the highest resolution that's going to play back the smoothest, go for the 2K. It's not going to have those sort of drop frames, I guess you could say. But what I would recommend is this 1080p at 60. This is going to record at your standard 1080p, full HD, but 60 frames, like 60 photos a second is basically what that means. And it's going to be very smooth playback. And if you were like caught something cool or in an accident, you're going to be able to play that back at slow motion in better, slower slow motion. So the more frames per second you get, the better the slow motion would be. So I highly recommend 1080p at 60. So in upcoming footage that we get to from my car, I'm going to do 4K, probably do some 2K, but I'll definitely do 4K and then show you guys 1080p at 60 so you can see how much smoother it is, just overall playback, and its quality should still be pretty good at 1080p. Image size lets you see your megapixels. That's probably more for your photos, because that shouldn't really matter on the resolution. Your loop recording, you can go 3 minutes or 5 or 1, or you can turn it off. But then that way, you don't want to turn it off. That way, you're stuck with one massive file. But what loop recording does, it's going to keep recording these small segments, and then your SD card won't fill. When it gets to the end, the last video file, it'll go back and start recording over the oldest file on the SD card. So your SD card never actually comes back and reports itself as being full. You want to record audio on or off. So we will also, when I get into the car, I always test the mic. Sometimes the mics are terrible and sometimes they're okay. We'll see how the internal mic is on this one. I wouldn't expect it to be great, but hopefully you can at least hear me and you're not completely blown out by road noise. Motion detection here is like telling the camera to start recording when it senses motion, and that's not going to be very reliable. It could not work right. Just have it, when it powers on, it should start recording. That's all you want to do. So you don't need to worry about motion detection. G sensors, how sensitive do you want this, the shock sensor? I'm shaking it so when it gets a shake that it will lock the file for insurance reasons. How sensitive do you want it? Right now it's set to low. That's probably good. If it's set to high, it may lock the file if a door shuts. Someone gets in and the car's running and someone gets in the car, you slam your brakes on it. It could be too easy to start recording. To lock the file. Parking guard is going to be on or off. That's going to be, again, using the G-Shock sensor to start recording using the internal battery if the gyro detects movement of the car while it's parked. Wide dynamic range on or off. I turn it on. That just gives you a little more range on like your color and stuff. I don't see any reason why it would hurt having that on. Your exposure, you usually want to set that just default to 0. If you're someone who drives at night a lot, you might want to put that at +1 or 2. It's going to really make headlights get blown out, but it would help the shutter in there to stay open and gather more light. If you lived in Alaska and it's winter time, well, then you're going to be always dark. You're going to bump that up. If you're somebody who drives in the day all the time, maybe you live in the North Pole again in the summer where the sun doesn't go down, you might want to actually have that set to -0.3 or something if you feel like there's always a lot of glare. But for the most part, you don't want to mess with that. In a coding format, do you want to use the H.264 codec or the more advanced modern H.265? 265 has a little bit of compression. It's a little more modern, but some software doesn't like it for editing and playback. System settings. You got your Wi-Fi. Now you can connect this to Wi-Fi and use an app, but you connect to it and then you can view the camera while it's running, and you can download files to your phone. It's sort of a neat little feature to let you connect to the camera without having to actually pull the SD card. Auto power off, you can see set to 1 minute. Screensaver time, the beeping sounds, the boot up sound, language of English. You can have your 60 or 50 hertz for NTSC and PAL if you need to. Your date and time, on and off. The date time stamp, on and off. Your license plate number, which again, that's something I'll put in the future after I'm done with this video. And whether you want that on or off. So you could put it in, store it, and then if you wanted to turn it off and not have it in the video, you could just turn it off too. So that's something else I could do. Format the SD card, default settings if you want to set it all the way back to the factory, and then your version number for the firmware in case they ever would offer like a firmware flash or something for the camera. All right, that should be everything with the menus on this, so I'm just going to go ahead and power it off. And there we go. Let's just take a look at the cables, see what we got in here, and then we'll go ahead and get outside for some sample footage. So here are your cables. You got a micro USB to USB-C cable, I should say. That'd be if you wanted to charge it or connect it to a computer or something like that. Here is the USB-C to run this rear camera. As you can see, this one would probably be for your the main camera, and this would run into the straight one would run into this camera in the back. So you could use either one. It just depends on which one works best for your needs. Here is the USB, the suction cup mount for the windshield. There's probably some film you want to pull off this first, and this will mount into the top of the camera, and then you mount that to your front inside windshield, somewhere around your rear view mirror. And this is your power. So you can power this guy off of one of your traditional, these lighter sockets they use in cars now for just power reasons anymore. And it's nice that they give you a standard USB port on the top of these for powering it. Now, you could power this with just a USB to USB-C cable if you had one, and that would work as well. But this is what they give you. You can see there's USB-C, and there's some little oh, that's a GPS module. Huh. Interesting. Okay. I thought the GPS was built in on this, but I guess that makes sense. So you want to use this then. Interesting. It says GPS thing. I thought it was built into here. GPS chips are so small. It was showing no counter on it, but I assume it's because we're in the basement. So what this must do is this supplies the GPS information from this module. So you got some tape here. So we'll have to see if it recommends a spot to mount this. You probably want it up somewhere up above the dashboard, I would assume, so that it gets a more clear line of sight to get the satellites. So yeah, then you want to use this in that instance. If you don't use this, then I would think you're not going to get any GPS. Here's another piece of adhesive. If you needed to pull something off like the GPS module and remount it, then you can replace it with that. And here's a little pin for poking that little hole on the side of the main camera. If it would freeze up and you need to reboot it, electrical devices can freeze, and if the buttons and the touchscreen becomes unresponsive, you can press that in, and it'll restart the camera. All right, guys, I think that covers everything. This is very long, almost 20 minutes in, but again, if you want to know about this stuff, since I've reviewed most of these, I was pretty familiar, though obviously I was a little unfamiliar with the GPS not actually being in here. But at this point, a lot of you probably skip forward. We'll get outside now and test some 4K, 2K, I believe I'll do 2K, and some 1080p at 60 test footage along with a microphone test, and then at the end we'll wrap this all up. So we'll be right back. All right, guys, this will be the microphone test for the Surfola SD810. Currently recording in 4K. Of course, the rear video you're going to see is always going to be 1080p. You can't change that one. But we'll see how this mic sounds. Hopefully it's a lot like the 510, which is pretty decent, and not like the 310, which is really poor. But we'll see how this works here. Now, if it's a lot like the test footage I took in my house, it's going to have 4K here. I'm expecting to look rather sluggish. It may be less noticeable here fixed to my car, but again, it is interpolated. It's not true 4K. And I don't think it's going to be the best option. We'll try out some 2K here in a moment as I head to the gas station to get my kids. And then we will do some 1080p at 60, which I think is going to probably be the best option on this camera. So we'll be right back here in a moment, guys, and we'll test some of the 2K footage.